The nation had never seen anything like it. Over the course of 3 terrifying years, a faceless predator known only by the media as the Whisperer haunted small towns and suburbs across 3 states. His victims were always the same: children between the ages of 5 and 9, 10 in total. No ransom demands, no clear motive. Each child vanished without a trace, only to be found days later in remote locations, their lives taken in cold, calculated silence. The crimes paralyzed communities, schools enforced lockdowns, parents slept with weapons beside their beds. The police, baffled, launched one of the largest manhunts in American history. It wasn't until the 10th murder that the authorities found their first solid lead: a partial fingerprint on a broken toy left at the scene. The match led them to a quiet, unassuming man named Michael Vane, a 36-year-old former childcare worker with a history of mental health issues and a deeply troubled past. The arrest made headlines around the world. Michael didn't resist. He didn't deny. In fact, when asked by officers why he had done it, he simply said, "They cried too loudly." His trial was a media spectacle. Grieving parents packed the courtroom. Protesters demanded the death penalty. Experts debated his sanity. Michael sat through it all with a blank stare, sometimes smiling faintly when victims' names were read. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all 10 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. But justice, some said, wasn't enough. He was to be buried alive, not in the ground, but in steel and concrete. Michael was transferred to Fortress Blackstone, one of the most secure prisons in North America. Located in a remote mountainous region, Blackstone was designed for only the most dangerous: terrorists, serial killers, war criminals. Its walls were 20 feet thick. Every cell was monitored 24/7. Inmates had no contact with the outside world. There were no windows, no visits. He was placed in Block E, also called the Deep, an underground isolation wing reserved for the worst of the worst. There, he spent his days alone, surrounded by silence and steel. The guards were warned never to speak to him. He didn't have to be violent to be dangerous. Michael's weapon was his mind. Over the years, his name faded from the headlines. The world moved on. But inside those walls he waited, quietly, patiently. No one believed that anyone could escape Blackstone. They were wrong. The storm that rolled over Blackstone Prison that night was unlike any seen in years. Winds howled at 80 miles per hour. Lightning cracked the sky in quick succession, causing brief blackouts across the facility. For most inmates, it was just another brutal night in isolation. But for Michael Vane, it was the opportunity he had spent 6 years preparing for. His plan had begun with a single weak link: Officer Jason Reeds, a fresh recruit, barely 23 years old. Jason had been assigned to Block E just 3 months earlier. Naive, lonely, and eager to prove himself, he became the perfect target. Vane noticed his vulnerabilities immediately: the hesitation in his voice, the way he lingered near his cell, the emotional phone calls to his estranged father he thought no one could hear. Through carefully timed conversations and subtle manipulation, Vane began to break Jason down. He spoke about justice, about how the system ruins good men, about regret and redemption. He never asked for help outright. He simply planted seeds until Jason began delivering small favors: extra food, a newspaper, a pencil. Nothing major, nothing reportable. But it was the beginning of the end. On the night of the storm, everything aligned. The cameras in Block E glitched intermittently due to electrical interference. A staged fight in the mess hall drew most of the guards away from the lower levels. Jason, panicking under pressure, followed the final instructions he had been given in a scribbled note: disable the magnetic lock on Vane's cell door for precisely 17 seconds. That was all Vane needed. He slipped through the darkness, dressed in a stolen guard's uniform, and made his way through maintenance tunnels he had memorized from old blueprints. Blueprints he had stolen in pieces over years, through a smuggled magazine subscription that featured architectural diagrams. By the time the prison realized he was missing, it was too late. He was gone. The escape triggered a national emergency. News stations interrupted broadcasts. The FBI was deployed within hours. Roadblocks sprang up in every direction. Helicopters combed the surrounding forests. But there was no trace, no footprints, no dropped items, no witnesses. Warden Hilburn, disgraced, was forced to resign within 24 hours. Jason Reeds was arrested and charged with aiding a fugitive. In a teary confession, he admitted to being tricked, claiming Vane had convinced him he was wrongly imprisoned. The public, however, wasn't in a forgiving mood. Then came the first message. 2 days after the escape, a local police station in a nearby town received a handwritten envelope. Inside, a single line scrawled in red ink. Freedom is just another word for unfinished business. Panic spread like wildfire. Schools shut down. Parents pulled their children off playgrounds. America remembered what it had forgotten. Michael Vane was still out there, and this time, he was free. The manhunt for Michael Vane became the largest domestic fugitive operation in over a decade. The FBI, U.S. Marshals, state police, all mobilized, all chasing shadows. But it wasn't until Detective Rachel Keene was pulled out of early retirement that the tide began to turn. Rachel wasn't just another investigator. She had hunted Vane before, obsessively during his original killing spree. Her niece, 8-year-old Lily Keene, had been the third victim. She had fought to bring him down once. Now, with him free again, she had nothing left to lose. "He's not running," she told the task force during her first briefing. "He's revisiting. Every crime he committed was a ritual. Now he's retracing those rituals in reverse. He's not escaping. He's circling." While authorities searched cities and highways, Rachel followed the pattern. Revisited towns, abandoned childhood places, spots tied to old case files. She found subtle signs he had passed through. A missing dog, a vandalized statue, a drawing of a red balloon left outside a shuttered elementary school. Each clue more chilling than the last. Then came the tipping point. In a ghost town where Vane once lived in foster care, Rachel discovered a basement filled with newspaper clippings, old photographs, and one new message, written in charcoal on a wall: "Bring her. End it where it began." Rachel knew the place. The old Whitmore church, now abandoned and collapsing in the woods outside his hometown. It was where Lily's shoes had been found all those years ago, where his darkness had truly begun. She went alone, against orders. The church stood silent under a blood-orange sunset. Inside, the wooden pews were rotten. Dust hung in the air like fog. And then he appeared, calm, smiling, as if they were old friends meeting for coffee. "You came," he whispered. "You always understood me, Rachel. That's why I left you alive." Rachel kept her gun raised, her hands steady, but her voice shook. "You don't get to write the ending, Michael." "But I already have," he said, stepping forward. "I just needed you to read it." What followed was a brutal, desperate struggle. Fists, gunfire, blood. Michael stabbed her in the shoulder. She shot him twice in the chest. They collapsed onto the church floor together, broken, bleeding, surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Rachel survived. Barely. Michael Vane was declared dead at the scene. No ceremony, no burial. His body was cremated, his ashes scattered anonymously. In the days that followed, parents of his victims gathered at a memorial vigil. Rachel stood quietly at the back, her arm in a sling, watching candles flicker in the wind. "He's gone," someone whispered. "So why does it still hurt?" Rachel didn't answer. She knew why. Because some monsters die, but the scars they leave behind, those stay forever.